Welcome everyone to our BG5 Live. Today is March 17th, 2020. Happy St. Patrick's Day, and this is episode number 44. And today we're going to take a look at dealing with crisis. We happen to be in the trait of crisis right now. And so before we jump in and get started, let's say hello to our panel. So let's start with Natalie. Hey, Natalie, welcome.
Hi, yes, it is certainly crisis, but we made it. Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting episode.
Yes, most certainly. Most certainly. And I think it's a really important thing that we address right now. It's really interesting that we happen to be in the trait of crisis, and there's a worldwide crisis going on at the moment as well. So Chris, welcome.
Hey, you guys, thanks for coming and showing up today and really, learning how to deal with this crisis, both personally and professionally. So we got a fun conversation today, and happy St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's jump in and get started. And just as a reminder, if you want to kind of take a look at what's happening now, you can always go to our website and you can go to BG5 Live. You can find out what the theme of the day is. You can also visit our website and get a free report and find out all the stuff that we do and all the classes that we offer. So I invite you to check that out. So what we are taking a look at today is dealing with crisis. So we happen to be in trait number 36. This is the toilet paper aisle in our local store. You can see it is empty. So we're taking a look at crisis, the darkening of the light. And so the rule of cycles in which decline is natural, but not an enduring stage. It's action without awareness that leads to emotional crisis. Now, I want to repeat that again, and I'm just realizing I forgot to say that Lavina, unfortunately, is not going to be able to join us. So she's having dealing with a crisis of her own as well. So we can see that if we are in crisis, we do need to take care of ourselves. So action without awareness leads to an emotional crisis. And so action with awareness, so Lavina taking care of herself, can then avert that crisis. So action without awareness leads to emotional crisis. So there's something that we have to be really aware of right now. It's moving from inexperience to experience. Now, crisis is necessary. Often we think of crisis as a very bad thing, but also take a look at what's on the other side of crisis. What's on the other side of crisis is progress. And so oftentimes the crisis, it's something that we're not experienced in. We don't know how to deal with. We don't know how to work with. And so we're moving from this inexperience of the environment that we're in, what's happening. We're going to learn, we're going to grow. And through that, it's moving through this inexperience to experience. This is meeting the challenge of change. What's happening right now is change. So it's about meeting the challenge of change and growth in both your work and life. So with change also comes growth as well. And it's the fears of vulnerability and inadequacy, right? You take a look at the shelves in the supermarket here, you can feel very vulnerable. Like, how am I going to get the supplies that I need? Or, that I was inadequate in preparing before this. So there can be a lot of fears that can lead to panic. So it's about waiting for emotional clarity. As we can see, trait 36 is in emotional intelligence. Therefore, it is deeply connected to the emotions as well. And so it is about waiting for emotional crisis. It's very easy when there's panic to act on impulse versus waiting for that emotional clarity. And if you think about it, more than 50% of the population are emotionally defined, meaning that if you have a lot of emotional people that are very panicked, and then we have the other half, which are not emotionally defined. And then what they do is they take in the emotions and they amplify it, make it even bigger. right? So wait for emotional clarity. And I think this crisis is actually forcing us to wait in many respects. And a shift in feelings is the end of the cycle. So again, we're kind of in this cycle of crisis right now. And when feelings shift, that also indicates the end of the cycle as well. So I wanted to open it up, and I would also love to invite anyone who is watching us via Facebook, also those that are here live in our Facebook Live. If you have something to share, if you have questions to ask, if you've been observing the craziness, to share what you have observed and seen as well. So Natalie, I'd love to get your take on everything that's going on with the crisis.
Yeah, well, I have a lot to share, but one beautiful thing, yesterday I was teaching and my assistant lives in South Africa, Sorrel. And there's a lot of things happening, but indeed waiting and taking precaution and social distancing and self-quarantine, etc. But at the same time, it is really bringing something beautiful. People are uniting, and he said in South Africa, racism is really, big, and all of a sudden it's not a problem. Like now we have like a common something to worry about, and I really do hope that it brings like a drastic shift in our awareness, in our being, in our way to look at each other, to appreciate, to value what we do have, etc. And today I was teaching just before this, and so from 6 at night, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And then at 8 p.m. I was aware that it was going to happen, but I forgot about it. Then outside, everybody got outside or opened their windows or went on the balconies to applaud for the caretakers and the people in hospital, the nurses and the doctors. And it was like, I got the chills because I was not expecting it anymore. And then the uniting in being, each individual in their homes and then uniting in that way. And actually I have a student that lives in Spain, and she was out on her balcony, and I heard the clapping in Spain as well, because they do that every day now at 8 o'clock as well, the same time zone. So it's, fascinating what's happening. And yes, there are precautions taken to, to contain the crisis, but there's a lot going on, underneath the surface or around it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I actually, I feel calm. And I had several students say that today, even though they're at home, they're feeling calm. And another something they observed, that actually because the whole world shuts down, everybody needs to take a pause and a rest. And also from the rush, hurry existence that we, worldwide are living in, all of a sudden it takes a pause and people start to reflect, like, is it worth it? Is this what I want? Is this, how it's supposed to be, etc. So yeah, there are so many layers to this. Yeah. And it's not an enduring state. That's also something. I mean, it's tragic, but it's not like a massive death rate. Like, of course, yes, people do die. I'm certainly aware of that, but it's not like everybody who gets it dies. Like, it's not a disease that's that severe, right? Or so yeah, it's fascinating and interesting. What's
Yeah. And often crisis is this time of awakening, right? Because we have, we've been a bit asleep, I think, at the wheel. We have become very complacent, and we've taken things for granted, right? You know, we take for granted that toilet paper will always be on the shelves. So it really is, I think, a huge wake-up call for each and every one of us. And again, yes, there's things to take precautions on, and you know, it can seem like there, you know, there's panic and pandemonium, but I think it's actually the fear that's actually worse than the virus itself. And so I think this really is a time to wait, to pause. And I love what Natalie said. It's like putting a pause on the entire planet. That's one of the things that really fascinates me, is that this is not just the United States. It's not just Europe. You know, it is global. It is all over the world. And so, as Natalie was saying, this pause to really take a look at, you know, who am I? What is my life? What am I doing? How often do we have this opportunity and this chance to simply pause? So there is a positive and good side of this crisis. Yes, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were talking about it, Natalie, I just want to remind everybody that this is the collective experiential circuitry. So we, you know, as the trait 36 is, and so we are all in this together, right? As we navigate it as individuals, we are all in it together. I think it's so beautiful that in Europe and the Netherlands, you're all clapping. I think it's just awesome. I hope that the US will do that too. We're a little more spread out, but I think in the cities, it'd still be amazing to do that. The other thing I just said, when you said it's like pressing pause, I think it's interesting. This is a respiratory disease. And so one of a couple things, right? The lungs relate to grief. So, you know, where on a more esoteric, mystical level are we, you know, is the planet, is all of us as a collective not even dealing with our grief, right? And then the other thing is that this pause is like taking a deep breath, right? And really like pausing to take more deep breaths and noticing and honoring, right, that there's some that aren't going to be able to because of this. And what does that look like? And so I just think that, again, you're right, there's all these different layers. And one of the things that I love about BG5 and human design is that it's showing us, it's a mirror reflection, and also shows us the mechanics of the program. It's it's synchronistic that on Friday here in the United States, when we were in trait 36, I think it was 36-2, you know, our president declares a national state of emergency. And we're going to look at some designs a little bit later here of people of crisis, and our president does have that in his design. And so I think it's really interesting to see that. And so that, again, the other piece of it is to know that it isn't enduring, and yet hopefully this awareness that we're all in it together is enduring, that those are the things, this sense of, hey, we're in this together. And it's also illuminating where there are people who are not thinking that way at all, which is really unfortunate, but you know, that's part of the crisis.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I wanted to share a quote from Ra, because I think it really speaks to exactly what's happening here. And remember, we are in this 7-year cycle, and Ra talked a lot about 7-year cycles. We are in this 7-year cycle moving towards 2027. And this is, in a sense, just a taste of, you know, really we're shifting into it now. It's not like we get to 2027 and then it shifts. We are shifting now. Yeah. So one of the things that Ra talked about is that the system is breaking down. And he said the system is breaking down not because there's something wrong with the system. Its time has come to an end. It just is. So these are unusual times that we live in, and we're on the cusp of a great change in the way that the world works. So we are at this precipice. We are at this change. We are at this cusp of everything changing. And anytime in the history of humanity that you come to the cusp points, there are all kinds of disarray that arise all around. It's a change. So things are changing. So there is a deep and profound mutative force that's at work here on the planet. So let's leave the blame game behind and let's enter into the only thing that allows us to survive in the next cycle. The honoring of individual authority, following your strategy, operating correctly within yourself, and you will live as you should in this life. This is key. This is the point. It's about following your decision-making strategy, and it's going to keep you safe. He said, there is no one that you can depend on. There is no one that you can rely on. And truly, there is no one that you can trust but yourself. I often say this, and we've been living in this era of illusion and delusion, which we're shifting out of. So we're awakening to what is true. And at this point, it can be really confusing because we're getting conflicting stories of, you know, one person is saying it's really bad, the other person is not. This news report is saying this news report is saying something else, right? So there's no one that you can rely on, and there's no one that you can trust but yourself. And just consider for a moment, what if everything we have been taught and everything that we believe, what if everything is a complete lie? Just imagine that.
Crisis!
Yeah. I mean, would that be a crisis to have everything uprooted that you have thought, that you have believed in the past? Not saying that's necessarily what's going to happen, but I think there's going to be a big shift where a lot of the illusion and delusion, a lot of the false facts are going to be brought, or the false illusions are going to be brought into light, where we're really going to start to understand what the truth is. And really, ultimately, through this time, because of all the craziness, because of these conflicting messages, trust yourself. And he says, when you're correct and you're operating correctly, that trust in yourself is your armor for your life. It will protect you. It will guide you, because it's precisely what you're here for. I want to read this again because I really want you to soak this in. When you're correct and when you're operating correctly, that trust in yourself is your armor for your life. It's what's going to protect you. It's what's going to guide you, because it's precisely what you're here for. So, it's really amazing the information that we talk about in BG5 and human design, because it really is the information and the knowledge for this coming time. And we are the ones, our generation, who stand at the edge of this precipice. We are the ones that are here to demonstrate the correctness of the way, so that we can enter into this new age, that us, our children, and those beings that we have contact with can enter into the new cycle properly equipped. And that's ultimately what BG5 and human design is all about, is learning how to be ourselves, learning how to trust and love ourselves, learning how to make decisions correctly, because that's the time that we're shifting into. We're moving from the era of planning, large corporations, large governments, large organizations, etc., and we're moving into the era of the individual. And one of the things I think this is doing is waking us up, and waking up our spirit to who we truly are. Think about it. If we're disconnected from everyone else, and it's very interesting, in the United States, they are recommending not meeting in groups of 10 or more. Now, for those of you who have, are familiar with BG5, human design, and OC16, OC16 is large groups and organizations. Guess where it turns into an OC16? Guess where it turns into a WA at 10 people? So it's almost like disconnecting from, in a sense, the WA circuitry, so that we can really get in touch with who we are. So we can get away from this collective noise and chaos and conflict and chaos and panic and whatever else, so that we can really get back in tune with who we are. Mm. Yeah, anything that Chris or Natalie you'd like to add or say?
So just earlier today in my Facebook group, I did a Facebook Live on trusting yourself, and I was sharing, and I'll paraphrase the story. I'll make it a lot shorter, but basically my son had a ski competition last Thursday that it was still scheduled to go, and we were supposed to go drive 2.5 hours towards Seattle area, be there, then go to the mountain. And as far as we knew via this app, it was still happening. They had run the competition on Thursday. He was supposed to compete the next day. And my husband, and I'm like, go, right? I'm in the like, well, we're going. Like, it was just, not even a question. And my husband says, let's wait. He has trait 36. He says, wait a second. Let's ask some questions here about this. Is this really a good idea? I watched my shadows and distractions defend my position, right? It didn't want to stop. It wanted to keep going. And so we finally kind of get through that. And I said, you know what? Here's the quick and easy way to do it. Just ask me some yes, no questions, so my sacral can respond. So we asked me a lot of different questions, like, is it in the highest and best to go or not? And even though I wanted to go, like my personality wanted to go, my mind wanted to go, my body was, don't go. And so he looked at me and he said, and we're both feeling the disappointment that our children are going to feel. Neither of us really wanted to share. Like, this is going to be really disappointing. This is really inconvenient that we're getting this. And I kept saying, I wish the outer authority, I wish they would just cancel it so that I don't have to make this decision. But we, as far as we know, it's still going. So, he says, I wish we knew why. And I said, I do too. But what I do know is that my sacral, I can trust it. And so this is what we're going to do. We're going to go tell the kids that we're not going and we're really sorry. And so we had spent a little bit more time, logically kind of taking some other acts, but basically came back to my sacral saying, we don't know why, but just know. So we sit down with the kids, we say, we're not going. And they're like, and I said, I'm really sorry. And then my son says, well, they did cancel some of the events worldwide. Did you check the website? And I said, no, I didn't check the website. I was checking the app. I look at the app or the website, and at the same time that we were muscle testing myself, that my husband was asking those yes, no questions, they posted on the website that the events for the remainder of the season were canceled.
Wow.
And so my daughter says to me, wow, your gut knew. And I was like, yes, it did. And this is modeling, right, for the kids, that even though we don't know why, we just have to trust it. We're not really sure. We're sorry. This is a disappointment. Don't really have anything else to go on other than this is just it's not supposed to go. And the next week, their school is canceled for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
National state of emergency, like all this stuff. My gut knew that before the logical mind had all the information. That's what it means to trust yourself. That's what we do here at this is really helping business leaders and individuals to trust themselves implicitly, to make the tough decisions, to protect our families and ourselves and our businesses from leaking energy, money, resources, time when we don't need to.
Yeah. Wow. That's a really powerful example.
It was cool. It was really cool.
Of how that shows up
afterwards, which is awesome. He's like, witch? I was like, it's not witchcraft. It's really just trusting yourself, but it's powerful.
Yeah. But think of how many of us are not in tune with that. right? Now, if you've been studying human design in BG5, hopefully you are in tune with what your decision-making strategy is.
Yeah.
However, when we take a look at the world in general, how detached they are from listening to that body intelligence,
Right.
how they make decisions from the mind, that they don't wait for clarity.
Or
that's what creates chaos.
Right. Or they wait for someone else who's in authority to tell them. And we've clearly seen that there's a lot of misinformation from the authority figures here. It is about really trusting ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But yeah, what it also shows, I mean, we are teaching this information and even us as instructors, and you know, Chris, as instructor, living it for a while, years, it can be tough to trust it, to really trust it. But you know, having these occasions, having these proofs of the body wisdom helps to be able to trust it, right? That's when you just said to your husband, ask me yes no questions, and even your mind, and you wanted to go. But you know, so be aware of this. It is not always easy to trust it, as we are not used to it. You can make up a lot of stories about it, and you need some wants and desires getting in the way, etc. But yeah,
exactly. And I also want to point out something too. You know, again, there's the trusting ourselves, but Lisa on Facebook Live has a comment, and I think that this is also kind of goes to what crisis can offer us too, as businesses are moving through this. So she said, you know, it'd be amazing moving forward to see more people being able to work from home in the future, having more trust amongst employers and allowing people to work remotely. Well, here's a big experiment, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of companies out there that I have clients who have their whole company work remotely, and I have clients where they don't, they have to show up. And it's really interesting to see how this is a sort of a forced experiment for a lot of employers who were like, should we, shouldn't we? And it does. Look at how many fewer cars there are on the road, you know, how much less, you know, fossil fuels that we're using, how, you know, families can manage you know, their kids are at home. Now they're having to manage a whole different thing. And again, that's also where understanding your design comes in, to understand how you can get pulled off track and off your rhythms, for instance, or something like that. How do you work from home? How do you stay focused? Right? So there's all different ways that we can apply this, but it's a cool, big experiment for you know, breakthrough for employers in a huge way.
No, but also for schools. I mean, your kids are 6 weeks off. My daughter for now is 3 weeks off. She was like celebrating. This was her prayer, and her prayers has been heard. But the other thing she's been asking for a year now. She's 1.5 years on high school. Because she sees me teaching online. She said, Mom, why can I not have online school? Like, she's been about this, and now it's going to happen. Like from starting tomorrow, they have online tasks. They have a Google Classroom, etc. So, and the other interesting thing, I was reading an article in The Guardian, and this woman said, you know, the coronavirus will pass. Eventually it will pass, but we will never go back to normal, whatever we see as normal. So we are all of a sudden, all of these things we thought were impossible or we couldn't do, all these outside of the box ways of working, ways of organizing, etc., are prompted. Boom, they're there. But they will not go back into the box, you know. And so she had these examples of in England of World War I. So in other times, the crisis is a world war. At least it's not a war, right? At least it's you know, a virus, and we're containing it. And if everybody stays in quarantine, you know, not a lot of casualties. But then in World War I, they went during the war from a 6-day work week to a 5-day work week because they couldn't manage with all of the employees, you know, out in the war. But they didn't go back. It stayed 5-day work week. World War II, the Second World War, all of the men were at the front and fighting. So a lot of women went into the factories, went into the offices to do the work, to get, you know, it going. They didn't go back to the kitchen, right? They stayed in the workforce. And then all this, you know, feministic activities and, you know, the having the equal rights, etc., erased from that. So, you know, who knows what will emerge from this in half a year, and then a year from now. I mean, I'm just curious, really, sincerely curious, what will actually be different. And the other thing that she said, since we are in social distancing and self-quarantine, etc., you choose who you want to bond with. You choose, if you are going to see somebody, that it is of value. You actually value who you are going to see and who you are going to meet, which is what we see, you know, what we know that eventually it's what the shift is about. Let me just put it like that you go from being your individual and really having real contact and real, you know, association. And then, you know, just from the mere fact of doing that, of being aware of it, you may shift, you know, your autopilot social settings, your autopilot work way, your autopilot moving, everything.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, you know, you just brought up something too, of going back to the conversation about starting a new 7-year cycle, right? If we look at it, you know, we have to disrupt the foundations in order to rebuild. And that, just think of whenever a building is torn down, is that a nice, gentle thing? No, they bring a wrecking ball and dynamite. You know, they're like, we got to knock the sucker over. We're not going to use like tweezers. We're going to make it really nice for everybody. It's loud, it's messy, it's scary. You know, it's intense. People have grief and feelings about it. I miss that bill. You know, like that's all what's happening right now. So that by 2027, you're, like you said, Karen, we've already, like, it's, the foundation has been laid so that we can be off and going, like even more full on in this new way of being. And the children and the way the newer generations are going to take over. Like we're setting the tone here, and we have to blow some shit up before it can settle down to rebuild.
Yeah. And exactly. And just like I said, what's on the other side of crisis? Progress.
Yep.
And in many ways, progress can only happen, you know, through crisis. What do they say?
The only thing that endures is change.
Yes. Yeah. And necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so if we're complacent, if we take things for granted, if we're just on autopilot, we don't have to worry about anything, right? There's no progress, there's no change. But boom, there's a shock and everything changes.
Yep.
Because what we're taking a look at, I wanted to talk a little bit about where we're shifting to and what the plan is. So we can take a look at the global cycle and where we are and where we're moving to. And the plan, we can see the plan in the driver, which is the two, which drives, the plan is what drives everything forward, that gives everything direction. And we're moving from growth in the 42-1 to initiation and shock. So we're moving into a shock. It's going to be a shock, right? For how many of us has this been a shock that the entire world, in a sense, is being put on pause? And so we're moving from this diversification, growth through expansion, the ability when surplus resources are available to extend one's activities beyond their normal scope, and too much expansion can lead to decadence. And so in many respects, you know, we've been working on autopilot and we've been sort of in this sort of space of decadence, right? We can have as much as we want, when we want, you know, and what's happening is, in a sense, this awakening, this shock. 51, there we go. 51 is initiation. 51 is about shock. And what we're moving into is the 51-6, which is about separation. Very interesting. So this is the power of the ego to meet challenges alone. And in times of crisis, when all those around are confused and in disorder, the ability not to succumb to panic, but to have the will and vitality to survive it alone. Now, it doesn't mean necessarily that you have to, be completely isolated and be completely alone. That's not the point. The point is to survive it alone. It means trusting yourself. Exactly what we just talked about. And it's very interesting that this is part of the shock, the separation, and what has happened, right? We have social distancing, we have self-quarantine, are the new buzzwords of today. So what we're doing, in a sense, is this separation, and sort of this separation from the sort of global conditioning force, so that we can really tap into who we are, what we said at the very, very beginning, who we are, what's important to us, what is correct for me, and reconnecting with family and friends. I mean, we've been in, just like, as Natalie was saying at the very beginning, this world of go, 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 that we don't even have time to stop and smell the roses, with everything on pause. Guess what? We have an opportunity to do this, and through separation, really get in touch with who we are. So not only does it help from spreading the virus, it also, again, this is multiple layers. This is not just what it is on the surface. There's multiple layers to this. And, it really gets us, connected to really what's important, and wakes us up to how much we've taken for granted, and how much we've just become sort of daily zombies, not really paying attention to anything. And we haven't had to fight for our survival for a long period of time, not in my generation, not to the extent, there've been, or not where I've lived anyway, and in my environment, there's not been that need to, really, in a sense, fight for survival, but this is bringing up, in a sense, also those survival fears as well. Yeah, so it's very fascinating.
Yeah, when you were talking, I was thinking of a blessing in disguise, because this is really what my students also shared, and from not only their personal experience, but also friends close to them. My Spanish student, she says she had a friend gathering online, like everybody with their drink and having beers and fun, etc. But she said everybody is quite calm, like even though there is hysteria and panic and etc. But also people feel like, oh, finally I am at home.
Yes.
There's nothing else you can do, so you get quote unquote permission from the authorities to be at home and rest. Like, yeah, you probably do some tasks and some things online, but it's essentially also a pause and a rest, a blessing in disguise for a lot of people.
I think so.
And not a blessing in disguise if, whatever, there will be social disrupts in the sense of people losing jobs maybe eventually, but I think we are creative and also how do you say that we support each other from your own being. That's what I see happening. Like, there was this really old man in the grocery stores with his I don't know,
cart,
walker.
Yeah. Walker.
Imagine, I don't know, 80, 90. Imagine him walking in the grocery stores and things are not there, right? So there were people actually helping him because he looked confused. And this is, we get closer as well.
Yeah.
In other sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's look at who are
yeah.
Because I have a 2 o'clock and I really want to listen to the rest of this.
Okay, let's go through this real quick and then we'll go through this. So with crisis, this is quality 6. This is justice. the inevitable survival of the right. So this is what is the background frequency for today, the trait for today. So it is the knowledge and attendant fate that the powers of darkness eventually destroy themselves. So those who the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad. So the correctness of crisis, when it arises out of pure feeling. And the challenge of it is the sorrow or cynicism that comes in seeing that despite the correctness of feeling, there's always a crisis, a profound sorrow and cynicism that is not diminished by the understanding that darkness is self-annihilating. And I really feel like one of the things that's happening behind the scenes is that there is a lot of change in our financial structure. I think there's going to be a lot of change in our work structure, a lot of change in the markets. There's going to be a lot of change. And I think for a long period of time, there has been, in a sense, a kind of ruling class that has disempowered us as individuals. And I think that veil is lifting. I think we're moving from the darkness into the light. And the power of darkness right now, I think, is in the process of destroying itself. And so with that process, with whatever's happening, exactly.
I'm dancing over here. I'm just like, yeah. For those of you who can't see it on Facebook Live.
Yeah. You know, with the powers that are you know, in a sense destroying themselves, it also, in a sense, is safer for us as individuals, right, as citizens, you know, to be at home. You know, one of the things that often happens are false flag shootings, things like that. But if there's no sporting events, right? Or if there's no schools in the setting, you can't have a school shooting. You know, if there's no big sporting events or no people gathering in bars, you can't have any of these kind of events. So I think it's also protecting us as well, you know, as things are happening and shifting and changing. So I think there's a lot of this that is also going on behind the scenes. And it's very interesting just talking about this, because I think the whole, you know, we've seen the markets go up and down and are crazy. And I think we're actually shifting over to another financial system as well. And it's very interesting. If we take a look at Grover Cleveland, he was the 22nd and the 21st president of the United States. And he has trait 36.6 as his core essence, his life work. And that is the material plane. So you are a witness to the mundane or the material plane who sees vulgarities in humanity, like the good, the bad, and the ugly, yes, yet has the potential to show that there's something more, the light, the spirit, the awakening, the enlightenment. And so what I was talking about, in a sense, that dark to light, if you will. Now, it's interesting that he was the only president to be elected in 2 non-consecutive terms, and his second term was unfortunately derailed by the Panic of 1893. So this is a time that there was a serious economic depression, and something that which both him and the country struggled to recover from. And I think this is actually where the start of the economic changeover, for example, the Federal Reserve here in the United States is part of the central banking system. And I think part of what's being dismantled is the Federal Reserve, and switching from, we've been on a petrodollar debt system, switching back to the gold system. And I think the markets had to come down so we can actually make this shift. So I don't know for sure, but I think this is one of the major shifts that's happening as well. And so what's interesting is it started to happen with Grover Cleveland, because President Cleveland was forced to borrow $65 million in gold from Wall Street banker J.P. Morgan and the Rothschild banking family of England. And it's ultimately that which started the Federal Reserve here in the United States. So I think it started here. I think it's starting to end now. And so the interest rates have dropped to zero. I think eventually we're actually hopefully getting rid of the Fed and the central banking system as well. So very interesting there. And you know, I know that people have varying views of Trump. Some people love Trump, some people hate Trump. However, if there is going to be a president that can lead us through crisis, you can see he does have, oops, I forgot to change this. He actually has this 36-3, so it's actually the 3 in the unconscious core essence. And this is transition. The point at which decline has exhausted its power and the emotional depth to endure crisis and embrace change. The ability to establish new order out of the ashes of the old. And if we think of where this is the material plane is also Eden. And so I think there, you know, I think we're in good hands. Again, I know people have varying thoughts of whether they like the president or not like the president. But I'm just strictly looking at design here. And so this is what's happening, this ability to establish a new order out of the ashes of the old. We're moving from the era of planning, and we call it the era of the individual, but it is of the sleeping phoenix. It's awakening the phoenix, the individual, to rise up. And I think it's really returning the power to we the people, as opposed to, you know, in the hands of this sort of corporate elite. And we're moving towards an era of a pure capitalism, entrepreneurship, and away from this sort of crony capitalism, this sort of fake capitalism that we've been living under. So I think there is big changes afoot. And as Natalie was saying, I think there is, you know, there is a change that's happening that we're not going back. It's kind of like once you've taken it out of the box, like Natalie was saying, it's something that we can't put back into the box. I think things are right here at the precipice of changing, in a sense, forever. And I think they're changing for the good.
I think so too. I'd just like to comment, if you go back to Trump's chart there, is that, and that slide that you're just showing, is that, you know, one might also put out the point, which I will right now, that he has created crises and amplified crises in his third line, you know, in some ways, and so that could also be part of his contribution, right? In making emotional decisions that aren't grounded in emotional clarity. Right? There's just an observation that could also be what's happening as well, right? So
yeah.
Just a little bit of that too, right?
Yeah.
So, certainly he's a part of it. Certainly he's a part of it. And this 36 is a big piece of that.
Right. Woof.
I hear you, man.
Oh, you have a dog too. I thought you only had a cat.
Yes, I have my puppy dog too. This is Sandy.
No, I'm loving it.
Yeah. So again, you know, you have to trust yourself, right? We do have the authorities there that are, you know, are speaking to different things. And again, you trust yourself, trust working through this process. Again, know that, you know, that we are headed in the right direction. And it's going to be, it'll probably be more rocky, you know, before it settles down. So again, trust yourself. That is the key.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, awesome. Thank you, everyone. Again, visit our website. You can get the free report. Check out our courses and programs, and really thank you for being here, being a part of this discussion. I think it's something that's really important to talk about, really important to discuss, and really important for us to continue to stay calm and you know, be the leaders for those around us. Again, with people awakening to who they are and what's there, and you know, how to move forward and all the craziness, just get grounded in yourself. Believe in yourself. and trust yourself.
Amen to that.
Anything to wrap up today as far as what people should be aware of moving forward for Chris or Natalie? Anything that you would like to share?
I'll just say, I mean, just, echoing that is trusting yourself and, watching, waiting, pausing, using this time to pause, using this time to get clear. It doesn't mean you have to stop everything altogether. Business and life is still going on. So it's not, but it is a great time to really reestablish your own center within you. Again, whether you work for someone else or you own a corporation or you are a solopreneur, whatever that looks like, is really getting clear on what works for you, trusting your decision-making strategy, and trusting your design and living true to that. That's where we're heading. That's what the system is supporting. And, the system that didn't support that is crumbling right now. And that's what we're watching. And it can feel very disconcerting, but we got this. So yeah, hang in there.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
Natalie.
Yeah, and one last, how do you say that, light on the horizon. Tomorrow we'll move into love. So tomorrow
Yes.
we'll move in trade to 25, the love for everything.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Universal love.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's exactly the path. There we go.
Yep. Yep. And the more individual we can be, the more we trust ourselves, the more we can connect on that more universal level and tap into that universal love.
Yeah.
I love that. Awesome.
all
All right, everyone. Have a fabulous week. Stay safe, trust yourself, and follow your decision-making strategy. All right, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.